My sister, Rachel, always said the cabin was our family's sanctuary. Tucked away in the Oregon wilderness, it was a rustic retreat her husband, Mike, inherited from his grandfather, a place to escape the grind of Portland life. When they invited me along for a long weekend, I couldn't say no. I'd been drowning in deadlines at work, and the idea of 3 days with nothing but trees, a lake, and a stack of books sounded like heaven. That was before I knew what waited out there in the dark. The drive took us 5 hours, the last 2 on a winding dirt road that cut through a forest so thick it felt like the world had shrunk to branches and shadows. The cabin sat on a ridge overlooking a small, glassy lake, its cedar walls weathered gray by decades of rain and wind. It was simple, 1 story with a wraparound porch, a kitchen, a living room with a wood stove, and 2 bedrooms upstairs. The nearest neighbor was 20 miles away, the nearest town twice that. Cell service was a pipe dream. Perfect, right? Rachel said as we unloaded the car, her voice bright with excitement. I nodded, breathing in the sharp pine scent, but something about the silence felt heavy, like the air was holding its breath. That first evening, we settled in easy. Mike grilled burgers on the porch while Rachel and I played cards by lantern light, the windows open to let in the cool night air. The forest hummed with crickets and the occasional hoot of an owl, a soundtrack that lulled me into thinking this was exactly what I needed. We laughed about old times, and for a while, I forgot the unease I'd felt on the drive. But as the fire in the stove died down and we headed to bed, I noticed the quiet had changed. The crickets stopped, and the darkness outside seemed to press against the windows. I woke around 3 a.m. to a sound, a sharp crack, like a branch snapping underfoot. My room faced the back of the cabin, the window overlooking a steep drop into the hollow below. I lay still, listening. Another crack, closer this time, than the faint crunch of leaves. Probably a deer, I told myself, but my pulse quickened anyway. I slipped out of bed, the floor cold against my bare feet, and peered out the window. The moonlight barely pierced the canopy, casting jagged shadows across the ground. Then I saw it, a flicker of movement, a shape darting between the trees. Too tall for an animal, too deliberate. My breath caught, fogging the glass. When I wiped it clear, the hollow was empty. The next morning, I mentioned it to Mike over coffee. Probably a bear, he said, shrugging. They wander around here sometimes. Nothing to worry about. Rachel agreed, pointing out the claw marks on a nearby pine, ragged gashes left by something big. I nodded, but the shape I'd seen didn't move like a bear. It had been upright, quick. Still I let it go. They knew this place better than I did. We spent the day by the lake, swimming and skipping stones. The water was frigid, the kind that numbs your bones, but the sun was warm, and for a while I shook off the night's jitters. Rachel sprawled on a blanket with a novel, while Mike fished off the dock, his line glinting in the light. It was peaceful, almost too peaceful, like the forest was lulling us into a false sense of safety. On the hike back, I noticed boot prints in the mud near the trailhead, deep and fresh. Hunters, maybe? I said, pointing them out. Mike frowned. No one comes this far out. Hunting season's months away. Rachel brushed it off with a laugh. You're paranoid, Jess. It's probably Mike's from yesterday. But Mike shook his head, and we walked faster, the cabin's silhouette a welcome sight against the fading sky. That night, the unease crept back stronger. We were in the living room, the stove roaring, when we heard it, a low, deliberate knock on the front door. 3 slow taps, echoing in the stillness. Rachel froze, her wineglass halfway to her lips. Mike stood, his jaw tight. "Who the hell's out here?" he muttered, grabbing a flashlight. I followed him to the door, my stomach twisting. He flung it open, the beam cutting through the dark. The porch was empty, the forest beyond swallowed in black. "Kids messing around?" I offered, my voice thin. Mike snorted. "In the middle of nowhere? Doubt it." We locked the door, but the mood was shattered. Rachel kept glancing at the windows, her fingers tapping nervously on the table. Sleep didn't come easy. I lay awake, the knocks replaying in my head, when I heard it again. Footsteps, heavy and uneven, circling the cabin. They paused beneath my window, and then came a sound I'll never forget, a low, guttural hum, like someone trying to sing through a throat full of gravel. My blood turned to ice. I bolted upright, heart hammering, and grabbed my phone to check the time, 2:47 a.m., before remembering it was useless out here. The humming stopped, replaced by silence so thick it pressed on my ears. I didn't dare look out the window. At dawn, I found Rachel and Mike already up, their faces pale. "You heard it too?" Rachel whispered. Mike nodded, holding a kitchen knife he'd kept by the bed. "Something's out there," he said. "Not an animal." We searched the perimeter, and that's when we found the marks, boot prints, identical to the ones by the lake, circling the cabin in a tight, methodical loop. Beside them, scratched into the dirt, was a single word, "mine." Rachel gasped, clutching Mike's arm. "We're leaving," he said, voice firm. "Now." But the truck wouldn't start. Mike cursed, slamming the hood shut. The battery was dead, though he'd checked it before we left Portland. "Sabotaged," he growled, scanning the trees. Panic clawed at my chest. We had no signal, no radio, no way out. "We'll hike to the road," Mike decided, grabbing a backpack. "It's a day's walk, but we can flag someone down." Rachel nodded, her eyes darting to the forest, but I couldn't shake the feeling we were being watched. We set out at noon, the sky overcast with thick, gray clouds. The trail was narrow, the trees looming like sentinels, their branches scraping our arms. Every snap of a twig made us jump, every shadow a threat. Hours in, we found it, a rusted axe, half buried in a stump, its handle stained dark. Nearby, a tattered jacket hung from a branch, shredded and stiff with something that looked like dried blood. "We need to keep moving," Mike said, but his voice shook. Rachel clung to my hand, her nails digging into my skin. Night fell fast, too fast, the darkness swallowing the trail. We stopped to rest, huddling under a pine, when we heard it, a scream, sharp and human, tearing through the woods. It wasn't one of us. Mike grabbed the axe, his knuckles white. "Stay close," he whispered. The scream came again, closer, followed by that same guttural hum. My legs trembled, urging me to run, but there was nowhere to go. The trees were a cage, the hollow below a black abyss. Then we saw him. He stepped from the shadows, a hulking figure in filthy overalls, his face hidden under a burlap sack with crude holes for eyes. Twine stitched the edges, stained with grime and something darker. In one hand, he held a machete, its blade chipped and rusty. In the other, a coil of rope. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, head tilted, like he was studying us. Rachel whimpered and Mike raised the axe. "Stay back," he shouted, but the man took a step forward, then another, his boots crunching the leaves. We ran. Branches clawed at my face, my breath ragged in my throat. I heard Mike yell, felt Rachel stumble beside me, but I didn't stop. The humming followed, steady and relentless, weaving through the trees. My lungs burned, my vision blurring, until I tripped, sprawling into the dirt. Rachel hauled me up, sobbing, but Mike was gone, his shouts cut off by a sickening thud. I turned, and there he was, the man, dragging Mike's limp body into the dark, the axe abandoned at his feet. "Mike!" Rachel screamed, lunging forward, but I grabbed her, pulling her back. "We have to go," I hissed, dragging her down the trail. The humming grew louder, closer, until it felt like it was inside my skull. We ran blind, the forest a blur, until we hit the road, gravel underfoot, a lifeline. A truck's headlights pierced the night, and I waved my arms, screaming. The driver, an old logger, swerved to a stop, his face paling as we spilled our story. He didn't ask questions, just gunned the engine and got us out. The police searched the woods for days. They found the cabin untouched, the truck's battery drained but intact, and Mike's axe near a pool of blood in the hollow. No body. No sign of the man. Locals whispered about a recluse who'd lived out there decades ago. A trapper who went mad after his family vanished, leaving only rumors of a shack deep in the trees. The official report called it a bear attack, but I saw those eyes behind the sack, cold and human. Rachel doesn't talk about it. She sold the cabin, moved to the coast, but I see the haunted look in her eyes, the way she flinches at footsteps. I can't sleep without a light on. And sometimes, when the wind howls just right, I hear it, a low, guttural hum, calling me back to the hollow. The Volvo wagon crunched over the gravel path, its headlights slicing through the dusk as it rolled toward the cabin. Jake turned off the engine, and silence descended, broken only by the faint ticking of the cooling motor and a distant owl's call. "Here we are," Jake said, forcing cheer into his voice. "The family retreat." Mia squinted through the windshield, her breath misting the glass. The cabin stood before them, a two-story relic of weathered logs and shuttered windows. It looked untouched for years, which, as Jake had admitted, it had been. "Looks cozy," she said, her smile tight. Tom, sprawled across the back seat, snorted. "Cozy like a slasher flick set. You sure this place is safe, Jake?" "It's fine," Jake replied, though a flicker of unease tugged at him. His grandparents had built the cabin decades ago, and his parents had brought him here as a kid. But after his grandfather's death, the trips stopped. Still, it was a free getaway, and they all needed an escape from the city grind. Emily, Tom's sister, stepped out of the car, stretching. "I think it's charming," she said, her gaze sweeping the dense wall of pine trees encircling them. "So quiet. You can almost hear the trees whispering." Mia shivered. "Don't say that. It's creepy enough already." They hauled their bags and groceries inside, the front door groaning on its hinges as Jake pushed it open. The air smelled of dust and old wood, but the furniture, draped in faded sheets, was intact. A stone fireplace anchored the living room, and a narrow staircase climbed to the bedrooms above. "Let's get the fire going," Jake suggested. "It'll warm this place up." While Jake and Tom gathered firewood, Mia and Emily explored. In the kitchen, Mia found yellowed cookbooks and a rusty can opener. Upstairs, Emily discovered a hatch in the ceiling leading to a cramped attic. Curiosity piqued, she pulled down the rickety ladder and climbed up, her phone's flashlight cutting through the gloom. Cobwebs clung to the rafters, and forgotten boxes slumped in the corners. At the far end sat an old trunk, its leather straps cracked with age. With effort, Emily dragged it to the hatch and lowered it to the floor below. She opened it, revealing a stash of brittle newspaper clippings and a leather-bound diary. "Guys, look at this," she called, spreading the finds across the kitchen table. The others gathered around. The headlines glared up at them. "Family vanishes from remote cabin. Search continues for missing hikers. Whispering pines. A history of mystery." "Creepy," Tom muttered, holding up a clipping. "Says a family disappeared in 72. No bodies ever found." Mia glanced at Jake. "Did you know about this?" He shook his head. "No. My parents never said a word. Probably just local legends." Emily flipped open the diary, its pages filled with neat cursive. "This belonged to a girl named Anna. Listen, the whispers started again last night. I think they're getting closer. Dad says it's the wind, but I know better." A chill crawled up Mia's spine. "Okay, that's enough. Let's not freak ourselves out." But Emily kept reading, her voice soft. "I saw them today in the trees. Shadowy figures watching. I think they want something from us." Tom laughed, though it sounded forced. "Arthur, let's eat and forget this stuff." They cooked a simple meal of pasta and sauce, the fire crackling warmly. Conversation drifted to mundane topics, work, relationships, plans, but their eyes occasionally darted to the windows, where the darkness pressed in like a living thing. After dinner, they roasted marshmallows by the fire, trading ghost stories. Emily, inspired by the diary, wove a tale of restless forest spirits seeking revenge. Mia clutched Jake's arm, feigning fear, though a real unease simmered beneath her playful shrieks. As the night deepened, they headed to bed. Jake and Mia took the master bedroom, while Tom and Emily claimed smaller rooms across the hall. Mia lay awake, the cabin's creaks and the winds rustling filling the silence. Then, a soft tapping sounded at the window. She sat up, heart hammering, but saw only the moon's pale glow. "Jake," she whispered, shaking him. "Did you hear that?" He mumbled and rolled over. Mia stared at the window, straining to hear, but the sound didn't return. Eventually, she slipped into a restless sleep. Morning sunlight filtered through the pines, dappling the cabin floor. Over breakfast, they planned a hike to shake off the night's lingering tension. Jake led them along an overgrown trail, the air sharp with pine and earth. Birds sang, and for a while, the group relaxed, the diary's ominous words fading. An hour in, they stumbled into a clearing. A dilapidated shack hunched in the center, its roof caving and windows boarded. Vines snaked up its walls, reclaiming it for the wild. "Let's check it out," Tom said, grinning. Mia hesitated. "It looks like it'll collapse. Maybe we should skip it." But curiosity won, and they approached. The door hung crookedly, and inside, they found signs of life. A sleeping bag, empty food cans, a lantern with a half-melted candle. "Someone's been here," Emily said, lifting a can. "This food's fresh." Jake frowned. "Probably a squatter. Let's get out before they come back." As they turned to leave, Mia spotted a carving on the wall, a circle with intricate patterns radiating inward. "What's this?" she asked, tracing it. Emily leaned in. "It's like an occult symbol. I've seen stuff like this in books about pagan rituals." Tom rolled his eyes. "Great, now we're in a horror movie. Let's go." They left the shack, but its presence gnawed at them. Back at the cabin, the air felt thicker, the forest's silence oppressive. That evening, as they cooked, the lights flickered. They dimmed, then flared back to life. Jake checked the breaker box, finding nothing amiss. "Old wiring," he said, unconvinced. After dinner, Emily returned to the diary. "The whispers are louder now," she read. "They say they're coming for us. Mom wants to leave, but Dad won't budge. I fear for our lives." Mia shivered. "Please, Emily, stop. It's too creepy." But Emily pressed on. "I found a symbol carved into a tree today. The same one from my dreams. I think it's a warning." Jake straightened. "A symbol? Like the one in the shack?" Emily nodded. "Maybe. What if it's connected?" Tom scoffed. "It's a coincidence. Probably kids messing around." But doubt took root. As night fell, the wind howled, rattling the cabin. Shadows danced in the corners of their vision. Later, fetching firewood, Jake paused outside. At the wood's edge, a figure stood, a silhouette against the moonlight, motionless, watching. His pulse quickened. "Hey!" he shouted. "Who's there?" The figure lingered, then melted into the trees. Jake bolted inside, locking the door. "What's wrong?" Mia asked, seeing his ashen face. "I saw someone," he said, "just standing there, staring." Tom grabbed a flashlight. "Let's check it out." "No," Jake snapped. "It's probably nothing. A deer, maybe." They tried to believe it, but sleep eluded them. Mia lay awake, listening. Then whispers drifted through the walls, faint, urgent, unintelligible. She couldn't shake the feeling they were being watched. A scream shattered the night. Mia jolted upright, heart in her throat. What was that? Jake was already dressing. It sounded like Tom. They rushed to the living room. Emily stood there, pale. "Where's Tom?" "He was here," Jake said. "He went to check a noise outside." Flashlights in hand, they spilled into the night, calling Tom's name. The woods swallowed their voices, the darkness thick and unyielding. They searched until dawn, finding nothing. Back at the cabin, panic gripped them. "We need the police," Mia said. Their phones had no signal. The landline was dead, a casualty of the previous night's storm, Jake guessed. Emily paced. "This is like the diary. People vanishing without a trace." Mia clung to reason. "Maybe he's lost or hurt. We have to keep looking." They scoured the woods all day, shouting until their throats ached. As dusk fell, they returned defeated. Emily grabbed the diary. "There's more," she said. "Anna mentions a cult in the woods, rituals to summon spirits, sacrificing outsiders for power." Jake snorted. "A cult? That's insane." Emily held up a clipping. "This says a group was arrested here years ago, suspected of occult stuff." Mia's stomach twisted. "You think a cult took Tom?" "I don't know," Emily admitted. "But something's wrong." That night, they barricaded the doors and windows, too terrified to sleep. At midnight, footsteps circled the cabin. Then a knock. "Who's there?" Jake demanded, voice trembling. A gravelly voice answered, "Leave now or suffer." Mia clutched a knife, hands shaking. "What do we do?" Before they could act, the power died, plunging them into darkness. Glass shattered. A rock crashed through the window, a note tied to it, "You're next." Panic erupted. They grabbed their keys and ran for the car, only to find the tires slashed. "Oh God," Mia whispered. "We're trapped." Hooded figures emerged from the woods, torches flickering, weapons glinting. The friends retreated inside, barricading the door again. "We fight," Jake said, distributing weapons, a poker, a bat, the knife. The attackers hammered the door, wood splintering. Then a figure materialized inside, a translucent young woman, glowing faintly. "Anna?" Emily gasped. The spirit pointed to the attic. "Go," it whispered. "There's a way out." Trusting it, they raced upstairs. In the attic, they found a trapdoor to a tunnel. They crawled through, emerging behind the cabin. As they fled, screams echoed, cult members clashing with shadowy forms, perhaps spirits of past victims. They ran until they hit the main road, flagging down a car and calling the police. Days later, the police found no cult, no broken windows, no slashed tires. The cabin stood pristine. But Tom's body lay in the woods, mauled by what they called an animal attack. The friends were left reeling. Had it been real? Mia found a photo on her phone, snapped accidentally during their escape. Anna's ghostly form watched from the trees. Driving away, past the Welcome to Whispering Pines sign, a faint whisper brushed their ears. "Thank you." They never returned. The narrow dirt road snaked through the forest, the car's headlights barely piercing the thick fog that clung to the ground. Sarah adjusted her grip on the steering wheel, her brow furrowed as she navigated the final stretch to the cabin. Beside her, her younger brother, Matt, scrolled through his phone, oblivious to the dwindling signal bars. "Almost there," Sarah said, more to reassure herself than him. The cabin rental had been a last-minute idea, a weekend escape to shake off the monotony of their lives. Matt had just finished his first semester of college, and Sarah, stuck in a dead-end job, craved a break. Matt glanced up, squinting through the windshield. "This place is in the middle of nowhere. You sure it's worth it?" "Trust me," Sarah replied, forcing a smile. "Fresh air, a lake view, no Wi-Fi, it'll be good for us." The cabin emerged from the mist, a squat wooden structure perched on the edge of Black Lake. Its weathered exterior was charming in a rugged way, with a sagging porch and windows that reflected the moonlight like dark mirrors. Sarah parked, and they hauled their bags inside, the air smelling of pine and damp earth. The interior was cozy enough. A living room with a threadbare couch, a fireplace stacked with logs, and a small kitchen. Upstairs, 2 bedrooms overlooked the lake, its surface still and black as ink under the night sky. "See? Perfect," Sarah said, dropping her bag by the couch. Matt shrugged, already testing the spotty cell reception. As long as there's coffee, I'll survive. They settled in, cooking a simple dinner and trading stories by the fire. For a while, the cabin felt like a refuge, the silence of the wilderness a welcome change from city noise. But as the fire dwindled, Sarah noticed how the quiet deepened, pressing against the walls like a living thing. "Did you hear that?" Matt asked suddenly, his head tilting toward the window. Sarah frowned. "Hear what?" "A splash. Like something big hit the water." She listened, but the night was still. Probably a fish or a branch falling. Lakes make weird noises. Matt didn't look convinced, but he let it go. They headed to bed, the creak of the stairs echoing in the empty cabin. Sarah woke to a faint tapping sound, like raindrops on glass. She blinked, realizing it was coming from her window. The clock read 2:17 am. Groggy, she stumbled to the pane and peered out. The lake stretched before her, its surface rippling faintly under the moon. The tapping stopped, but something caught her eye, a shadow moving along the shore, too tall and deliberate to be an animal. Her breath hitched. "Matt?" she whispered, padding to his room. He was sprawled across his bed, snoring softly. Sarah hesitated, then shook him awake. "Matt, there's something outside." He groaned, rubbing his eyes. "What? Like a bear?" "I don't know. It was by the lake, moving." Matt sighed but followed her downstairs. They grabbed a flashlight and stepped onto the porch, the cold air biting at their skin. The beams swept across the shore, illuminating rocks and reeds, but nothing else. "See? Nothing," Matt said, shivering. "Let's go back in." But as they turned, a low moan drifted across the water, chilling Sarah to the bone. It wasn't the wind, it was too human, too pained. "What the hell was that?" Matt whispered, his bravado gone. Sarah's heart raced. "I don't know. Let's lock the doors and wait till morning." Back inside, they barricaded the entrance with a chair and sat by the dying fire, listening. The moan didn't return, but the tapping started again, soft, insistent, now at the front door. Sarah clutched a poker, her knuckles white. "It's just the wind," Matt said, though his voice trembled. The tapping grew louder, joined by a scraping sound, like nails dragging across wood. Then a voice, faint, garbled, whispered through the cracks, "Help me." Sarah dropped the poker, her blood running cold. "We're not imagining that." Matt bolted to the door, peering through the peephole. "There's no one there," he said, but his face was ashen. The whispering stopped, replaced by silence so heavy it felt suffocating. They didn't sleep that night, huddling together until dawn painted the sky gray. Morning brought no relief. The fog had thickened, swallowing the forest and lake in a white shroud. Sarah brewed coffee, her hands shaking, while Matt stared out the window. "We should leave," she said finally. "This place isn't right." Matt nodded. "Yeah, let's pack and go." But as they gathered their things, Sarah noticed something odd, a damp spot on the floor near the door, trailing toward the stairs. She bent down, touching it. "This is wet. Like someone walked through here." Matt frowned. "We've been inside all night." The trail led upstairs, ending at the closet in Sarah's room. She opened it, revealing a trapdoor in the floor, its edges caked with mud. Her stomach twisted. "Matt, look at this." He grabbed the flashlight. "What the hell's a trapdoor doing here?" They pried it open, revealing a ladder descending into darkness. A musty smell wafted up, mingled with something sour, like rotting fish. Against her better judgment, Sarah climbed down, Matt following close behind. The ladder ended in a cramped cellar, its walls slick with moisture. In the center sat a wooden chest, its lid carved with strange, swirling symbols. Sarah's pulse quickened. This doesn't belong in a rental cabin. Matt shone the light on the chest. "Should we open it?" Before Sarah could answer, the lid creaked open on its own, revealing a bundle of yellowed papers and a small, tarnished locket. She picked up the papers, letters, written in a shaky hand. The first read, June 12, 1953. The lake took him. I heard his voice last night, calling from the water. I should have left then, but I stayed. Now it knows I'm here." The next was more frantic. "It's not him anymore. Something's wearing his skin. I locked it down here, but it keeps coming back." Sarah's hands trembled as she opened the locket. Inside was a photo of a man and woman, smiling by the lake. The man's face was eerily familiar, sharp jaw, dark eyes. She'd seen it last night, in the shadow by the shore. "Matt," she whispered, "we need to get out, now." A thud echoed from above, followed by the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, descending the ladder. Sarah grabbed Matt's arm, pulling him toward a narrow tunnel she hadn't noticed before. They crawled through, the damp earth pressing against them, until they emerged by the lake's edge. The fog was impenetrable, but the cabin loomed behind them, its windows dark. And then they saw it. A figure standing in the water, waist deep, its head tilted unnaturally. It was the man from the locket, his skin pale and bloated, his eyes black voids. "Help me," it croaked, its voice a wet rasp before lunging toward them. Sarah screamed, shoving Matt toward the car. They sprinted, the figure's footsteps splashing behind them. She fumbled with the keys, the engine roaring to life just as a hand, cold and slimy, slapped against her window. The glass cracked, but she floored the gas, the car lurching down the road. The figure chased them, impossibly fast, its moans echoing through the fog. But as they crossed the bridge out of Black Lake, it stopped, standing motionless at the water's edge, watching them go. They didn't stop driving until they hit the highway, the cabin miles behind them. Matt was silent, his face pale, while Sarah gripped the wheel, replaying the nightmare in her mind. "What was that thing?" Matt finally asked. Sarah swallowed hard. "I think it was the man from the letters, or what's left of him. The lake, it did something to him." Matt nodded, staring out the window. "We're never going back." They reported the cabin to the rental agency, but when authorities checked, they found it abandoned. No trapdoor, no chest, just an empty shell. The locals whispered about Black Lake, about people who'd vanished over the years, their voices sometimes heard on foggy nights. Weeks later, Sarah found the locket in her bag, though she swore she'd left it behind. She burned it, hoping to sever whatever tie remained. But sometimes, in the quiet of night, she still hears a faint tapping, like water dripping on glass, and a voice whispering, "Help me."